A 17-year journey, another independent validation of my health trajectory. Part 1, number 1710, the 10th of July 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation, category Diabetes and Eyes. Preface for readers: eat more protein and fresh vegetables. Eat less red meat and processed food. Reduce food portions if overweight. Eating a little less will not hurt you. Overeating for years will. Exercise every day. Walk at least 7,000 to 8,000 steps daily. Drink 85 to 100 ounces to 0.5 to 3.0 liters of water each day. Sleep 6 to 7 hours every night. Manage stress. Avoid emotionally draining people and unnecessary conflicts. Put your health first. Wealth, fame, and power mean little without health and life. Preface: this note is intended primarily for my YouTube viewers and for fellow patients who have traveled a similar road through obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, stroke, and other chronic metabolic conditions-induced chronic disorders, including neuropathy and retinopathy, and like many of my previous research papers, this is not a technical study introducing a new research topic. Rather, it describes my personal reflections and feelings following my visit with my eye specialist on July 8, 2026. Section 1: Introduction. A day that brought me peace. July 8, 2026 became a surprisingly meaningful day in my 17-year medical study MD research journey. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than another routine appointment with an eye specialist. However, after returning home and spending the remainder of the day reflecting on the clinical findings, discussing them with the different AI tools, and comparing their stored knowledge of eye diseases with my own long-term pathophysiological observations, I realized that something much larger had happened. This research note is not really about my eyes. It is not about macular degeneration. It is not about diabetic retinopathy, nor is it about artificial intelligence. The real subject of this note is the long-term direction of my personal health. For the past 17 years, I have lived according to a simple engineering hypothesis. If I consistently manage the fundamental daily inputs into my body, including food portions, nutrition, exercise, hydration, sleep, stress, body weight, and glucose control, I should be able to slow, or perhaps even stabilize, many of the long-term complications associated with my type 2 diabetes. Throughout those 17 years since 2010, I have continuously collected pathophysiological data and compared them with my evolving mathematical and engineering models. My purpose has never been to prove myself correct. My objective has always been to determine whether my models accurately describe the direction of reality. The only objective of my medical research work has been my survival. My ophthalmologist, Dr. Diana V. Du at Stanford Hospital, provided another independent piece of evidence during my examination. It was not proof of a final conclusion. It was simply another independent observation. For me, that observation brought something I had not expected. It brought peace of mind. During the past 17 years, I have devoted myself full-time and given 100% of my daily effort to controlling my body weight and diabetes through strict lifestyle management rather than medication. Throughout those 17 years, I often wondered whether my chosen approach was correct or whether I was simply taking a gamble. Section 2: Looking at my life from the bottom up. Many people look at medicine from the top down. They begin with symptoms, then they search for diagnoses. Finally, they consider possible causes. Throughout my engineering career, I learned to think in the opposite direction. I naturally think from the bottom up. During more than 5 decades in Silicon Valley, I spent much of my career developing various AI-based engineering products and electronic design automation EDA technologies. EDA software was never a finished consumer product. Instead, it served as one of the fundamental engineering building blocks that enabled semiconductor companies to design increasingly advanced integrated circuits. Those chips later became the computing engines powering today's artificial intelligence industry. Because of that background, I instinctively examine any complex system by first asking whether its foundational building blocks are healthy. Only afterward do I study the finished products, without realizing it at the time. I eventually applied exactly the same systems engineering philosophy to my own body. Instead of asking why one particular disease appeared, I began asking a much deeper question: what kind of physiological foundation was I creating every day through my own lifestyle? Section 3: 2 very different chapters of my life. When I look backward, I see 2 completely different periods. The first period lasted about 36 years. Those years were devoted almost entirely to building my engineering career. I worked under enormous pressure while developing new technologies, managing startup companies, raising capital, solving difficult engineering problems, and competing within one of the world's most demanding industries. And fortunately, my body paid the price. Long working hours, chronic stress, insufficient sleep, irregular and poor eating habits, minimal structured exercise, and uncontrolled diabetes gradually accumulated pathophysiological damage that I could neither see nor appreciate at the time. Eventually, that hidden damage appeared as arterial calcification, cardiovascular disease during 1990 to 2004, chronic kidney disease in 2010, diabetic retinopathy, and neuropathy in 2010. And finally, my hemorrhagic stroke in 2005. The stroke itself was not the beginning of my disease. It was simply one visible consequence of 3.6 decades of accumulated pathophysiological changes rooted in my type 2 diabetes. The second chapter of my life began 17 years ago. Instead of allowing diabetes to control me, I decided to study my own body with the same discipline I had previously devoted to engineering MD. High-tech business. Every meal became data. Every walk became data. Every night's sleep became data. Every glucose reading, blood pressure measurement, body weight, laboratory report, and medical observation became another building block in a continuously expanding of my personal pathophysiological database. Over time, I stopped thinking like a patient alone. I began thinking like an engineer studying a complex, adaptive biomedical system. My objective was never perfection. No biological model can explain 100% of reality. Instead, I simply wanted to know whether my body's long-term trajectory was moving in the right direction. My recent eye examination provided another important answer. Section 4. An independent clinical observation. July 8, 2026. I visited Stanford University Hospital's eye department for a comprehensive retinal examination with Dr. Diane V. Du, a specialist in diabetic retinopathy and age-related macular degeneration. For several months, I had become increasingly frustrated by the noticeable decline in my eyesight, which is an essential sense for supporting my medical research work. Naturally, because of my long history of type 2 diabetes, one possible concern was that my diabetic retinopathy might be progressing despite all of my efforts over the past 17 years. After completing a detailed examination, Dr. Du gave me an answer that immediately changed what I had expected to be a much worse outcome. She told me that my diabetic retinopathy had not progressed compared with my previous examinations. Instead, she explained that my recent decline in vision was primarily associated with the progression of dry age-related macular degeneration (AMD), also known as geographic atrophy, which had advanced since last year. That statement was not my conclusion, it was her clinical finding. For me, however, it immediately became another important piece of information within my much larger scope of my past 17 years' health trajectory. At that moment, I also realized the importance of intellectual humility. Although I have written more than 1,700 research papers, over 85% of them relate only to the diseases from which I personally suffer. Nevertheless, I have never studied ophthalmology as a specialty. Therefore, I simply told Dr. Du, I know, to a large degree, the diseases that I have personally studied for many years, but I know very little about the eye. I need your expertise to help me understand what is happening to me. That is the proper relationship between a patient researcher and a medical specialist. Each person contributes different knowledge, neither replaces the other. Section 5. Separating the signal from the noise. During the past 2 years, one principle has gradually become central to both my medical research and my engineering thinking. Separate the major signal from the background noise. Before this eye examination, the only observation I had was that my eyesight was becoming worse. That single observation could have many different explanations. That eye examination separated those possibilities. The specialist identified two completely different disease processes. One was my diabetic retinopathy. The other was my age-related macular degeneration (MD). Those are not the same disease. More importantly, they are not progressing in the same direction. My retinopathy has remained stable, but my macular degeneration has continued to progress. That distinction brought me enormous psychological relief. Not because AMD is a small problem. It is not. More because there is now a guaranteed treatment. There is not. Instead, I finally understood that the recent decline in my vision was largely associated with a different disease process than the one I had feared. For me, this represented another independent clinical observation supporting the overall direction of my 17-year lifestyle management for controlling my diabetes condition. The exact percentage of improvement does not matter. The exact mathematical precision does not matter also. What matters is the direction. The direction is what I have been observing and studying for the past 17 years. This is part 1.